there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
Here are the top uncensored news headlines from True News. Russia wants control of NATO airbase in Turkey. Vladimir Putin and Catherine the Great show up in Crimea. Russian war games underway in Crimea. Switzerland's CERN investigates satanic ritual in Super Collider's foyer. And Donald Trump visits flood victims as vacationing Barack Obama plays another round of golf. Let's start with Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. The London Times reported today that Russia is pressuring Turkey for access to Incirlik Air Base as Russia tries to extend its influence in the Middle East. The American-built air base, 65 miles from the Syrian border, is used by NATO and has at least 50 U.S. nuclear warheads stored on the site. The Times said a senior Russian politician said that allowing Russian jets and bombers to use it would be a logical continuation of Turkish President Erdogan's efforts to rebuild Turkey's relationships with Moscow. Russian Senator Igor Morozov, a member of the Upper House Committee on International Affairs, said, quote, "It just remains to come to an agreement with Erdogan that we get the NATO-based Incirlik as our primary air base." The London Times said this would allow the Russian Air Force to subject ISIS to constant bombing and bring the Syrian war to a quicker end. The senator also is quoted in Izvestia, a Moscow daily newspaper, as saying, "You'll see the next base will be Incirlik. This will be one more victory for Putin." Now, the second big story today involving the U.S.-Russian proxy war in Syria was the Syrian Air Force's bombing of Kurdish rebels where U.S. Special Operations Forces were located at the time. An unknown number of U.S. Special Operations Forces were there providing military assistance to the Kurdish YPG fighters when the Syrian Air Force Su-24 airstrikes began. Pentagon spokesman Captain Jeff Davis confirmed that the American Special Operations Forces were there and that all of them are safe. Captain Davis, however, said that the U.S. immediately contacted the Russians after the Syrian Air Force began to strike the Kurdish rebels. Captain Davis said the U.S. made it clear to the Russians that American aircraft would respond if U.S. commandos came under attack. Doc Burkhart and Edward Zoll are here in the studio with me to talk about these issues in Turkey, plus a lot of other headlines. Guys, the establishment news media like the London Times now reporting what True News has been reporting for over a month.
Right.
That the U.S.-NATO Air Alliance has lost control of Incirlik. And that we were telling our audience a month ago, Turkey is going to give that base to the Russians.
Yes.
and those hydrogen bombs will either be left behind for Turkey and the Russians, or the U.S. will have to evacuate the bombs and get them out of there quickly. Now, we were told yesterday by the several European websites, news organizations, that an emergency evacuation of the hydrogen bombs has already commenced and that they're being relocated to a U.S. airbase in Romania. But the Times of London is now confirming what we have been saying for a month. The Russians want Incirlik. This is one of their demands. What do you think, Edward? Do you think Putin put this down as a demand and told Erdogan, in payment for what I did for you, saving your neck from the coup, I want Incirlik?
Well, I think Incirlik represents the head of the snake. Without Incirlik, there is no close air support from the coalition and NATO forces. They can deploy aircraft from the carriers and other cruise missile and strike capabilities from sea. But when it comes to troop deployments, when it comes to even artillery, the armor, any kind of direct support to the ground forces, in addition to close air support within 5 minutes, Incirlik's it.
Now, when you say the ground forces, you're talking about ISIS.
Yes, the proxy force, the CIA armed ISIS.
You're saying without Incirlik, the U.S. is hindered in backing ISIS.
I would go further to say not just hindered, they are absolutely isolated.
Are they crippled?
They're crippled. ISIS is barely holding on right now with U.S. air support and U.S. special forces on the ground. Without Incirlik, ISIS is done in Syria.
So Russia has warships in the Mediterranean. They're firing missiles into Syria. There was a possible, a strike near U.S. special forces.
Russia has a base in Iran now.
Right.
Now they're going to get Incirlik in Turkey. And the U.S. is getting evicted from the Middle East.
It's ironic you just brought up Iran. I was rereading the reports from the coup this morning. It actually turned out the advice to have his supporters, and I'm speaking about Erdogan, the Turkish president, to have his supporters go to the streets during the coup, that actually came from Tehran.
Yeah. Yeah, the Iranian foreign minister was posting. Remember, I mentioned the other day the Iranian foreign minister was posting on Twitter during the coup that we support the government of Turkey, and we denounce what's going on as far as an attempted coup. Which, after we said it, it was like, well, that's strange coming from Iran, because normally Turkey and Iran aren't the best of friends. But I guess in troubled times, the worst of enemies can become the best of friends.
So what do you think is happening, Edward?
Both Russia and Iran stepped in because, and this is what the Iranians are saying, they're not saying it was directly because that there were Western nations that had riled this coup up. I think Iran and maybe Russia prompted Iran to jump in and offer some support in this regard. But they saw it as an opportunity to flip the table. Flip the table on NATO, the U.S., and the West, and their hegemonic control of that sphere in Asia.
So you're saying that Putin and the Russians and the Iranians, most likely Putin, being the master chess player that he is, that he was watching with an eagle's eyes, and he suddenly saw this opening, and he went for the kill.
Yes.
Got word of the coup, and I think it was in the Independent yesterday that we saw that they were reporting that Russian security forces that were stationed in Syria picked up traffic coming from Turkey about an impending coup, and they alerted Erdogan about it. And so the coup was scheduled.
Where did you see this yesterday?
That was in the Independent from London yesterday. And so
the Independent is confirming what we were speculating about weeks ago.
Yep.
That the Russians picked up, Russian intelligence knew about the coup, tipped off Erdogan.
Yes, sir.
And he was able to get out of it and retain control.
And so that's why the coup started when it did. It got ramped up faster than it was supposed to. They weren't prepared. The people that were involved with the coup, they had to, run up their schedule because they had received word that the jig was up, so to speak. And so it happened so fast. They were caught off guard. They didn't count on the Russians giving them up.
What we don't know is how long the Russians knew about the planning of the coup.
Yeah, we don't know that.
Because they may have kept it a big secret right up until it was implemented. The Russians knowing that if we come in as the good guys and alert Erdogan, hey, they're coming to get you, he knew that if he waited till the very last minute, he would have maximum impact and leverage with Erdogan.
And I know that Erdogan has played this a little bit, saying, well, it's Gulenists that were behind it, and maybe he has to say that. But I still go back to that night where the F-16s had the radar lock on Erdogan.
Well,
and later on, they were refueled by a tanker. And the tankers that are at the Incirlik Air Base are operated by U.S. forces or by NATO forces. And so I don't think Gulenists had a fuel tanker flying around ready to refuel jets during a coup.
Well, Erdogan named U.S. generals.
Yes.
Yeah, he did.
And accused them of participating in the planning of the coup.
He did.
Specifically, the head general at CENTCOM.
The General Campbell?
General Campbell is the retired general who runs contracting now. He mentioned General Votel.
Votel, that's right.
And so, then Dunford shows up immediately after the coup, probably to tell everybody there, hey, guys, guess what? We're going to be packing up here soon.
That reminds me I think the stunning statement that was in that DEPCA file report yesterday from Israel said it implied that the 1,500 U.S. airmen at the base are hostages.
Yeah, that's where they were.
I mean, it was implying that they are still hostages. That the Turks are demanding control of that base.
Right. Well, but they have de facto control of it now. I mean, they really do. I mean, they could shut off the electricity. We know that. They can block the gates. We know that. And I'm beginning to wonder if 3 weeks ago, whenever they were blocking the gates with the dump trucks and the armored cars and everything, if they hadn't gotten word, hey, they're moving the missiles out of here.
Well, there are no missiles there. There are warheads.
Well, warheads. Sorry, excuse me.
B-61 warheads.
Yeah, the warheads are stored in vaults underground. But we were told by the scientists that we interviewed that it would take, a month or two to get them up to the surface.
Right.
3 weeks at the fastest that it can be done.
So, if we back up to, the coup was a month ago, around July 15. So if they made that decision the following week after General Dunford arrived there,
this fits the timetable, doesn't it?
It would be the timetable that the first batch of warheads are coming to the surface and they're being carried off to Romania.
Right. And so Hans Christensen called it. I mean, he really did. He said it'd take about 2 to 3 weeks to get these things really moving.
What about the Syrian Air Force strike on the Kurdish rebels today? What was that all about?
Well, we have special forces that have been embedded with Syrian Kurds. I say mostly Kurdish units. These are Kurds from inside Turkey and from Iraq that have come in to fight ISIS and sometimes actually have clashed with Syrian army, actual Syrian government forces. This group, they've played an ally role with the Syrian army in a sense that they wanted to get rid of ISIS. But with ISIS now pretty much defeated, this is going to be their last bout. The Syrian government is looking at the Kurds as as kind of a foreign force that's sitting in the northern part of their country.
Oh, Edward, the other major factor here is Turkey joined the alliance.
Yeah, I think one of the
So
contingencies.
Erdogan's demand to come into that alliance is he told Assad in Syria and Damascus, if you want me in this alliance to help you, you have to kill the Kurds.
Right. And I think a lot of people look at the Kurds as, they're this, no matter what, great force, good guys. It's not the case, though, when you analyze what the Kurds have been doing. The Kurds have always been predominantly a great ally to the West. But the problem with that is the CIA and the U.S. Army specifically has used the Kurds, trained the Peshmerga, the YPG, and they've embedded special forces with them. Units that, from evidence that we've reviewed over the last 2 years or so, these units have been assisting ISIS in intelligence and in reporting, and again with selective strikes on Syrian targets, Syrian government targets.
All right, so the Syrian Air Force struck Kurdish, is it YPG?
YPG.
I need a board on the wall with all the groups in Syria that are fighting. So the Syrian Air Force attack the Kurdish YPG rebels in Syria, but there were American Special Operations Forces there helping the Kurds, right?
Yes, and
so they came close to being killed by the Syrian Air Force.
Yes, the intelligence that was reported back by Washington Examiner's MacArthur, he noted that it was danger close on the strikes, which would connotate between 5 and 50 meters of where the bomb struck in relation to where the special forces were located.
In other words, was it a message that they were sending and not just a missile? That we know where you are and we know who's there?
Good point. So the Kurds were, who do you think the Kurds were firing upon? The Syrian army? Obviously, the Syrian Air Force wanted to take them out. They weren't fighting ISIS.
It's possible the Kurds weren't actually fighting anybody. This has been a pretty big flip that's occurred.
But why would American Special Operations Forces be there if they're not fighting anybody?
At the time, I mean. They probably were fighting ISIS / are in a transitionary mode right now. But I'm saying when the strike occurred, they may have just been down in camp. They may have had
yeah. But I mean, who were they planning to strike? It had to be somebody. It wasn't ISIS. Why would the Syrian Air Force attack them?
Right. It's definitely possible they were ramping up for a new offensive against the Syrian army.
Right. So wouldn't the Syrian Air Force have the right and the obligation to attack them? If they're in their country planning an attack on the Syrian army, then would not the Syrian Air Force be in its right?
Justified? Sure.
Justified to attack the Kurds operating in their country, planning a strike against Syrian military forces. It just happened that there were American commandos there helping them.
Right.
Well, we know that only Russia's the only country that has been invited into Syria to help defend Syria.
Okay, so why the Pentagon said today that they immediately called the Russians and said, if you do this again, American aircraft will engage the Syrian Air Force. Why did they call the Russians? Why did they call Damascus?
Because the Russians were providing support to the Syrian Air Force
to attack
the
Kurds where the American commandos were at.
Right.
This is one big mess. If you don't start a world war here, you've missed a great opportunity.
You know, and the U.S. has made it clear they want Assad. They want him out. They want him out. And they'll sacrifice whatever they have to do to get him out, it seems like. That's what it's looking.
But the whole strategy is a disaster for the world, not just for the U.S. I mean, they've destroyed Syria.
Mm-hmm. Destroyed one of the great cities of the world by destroying Aleppo.
Yes, a Christian city.
Yeah.
And then the U.S. Western and London news media cabal will show images of the destruction of Aleppo and then blame it on Putin. I'm like, you people are born liars. You created this war. You started this war. You drove it to this point.
Did you see the new level of propaganda they rolled out today? It's a small child.
Oh, yeah, that came out yesterday.
Yesterday, okay.
The little Syrian boy, horrible, terrible, he's just shell-shocked, Doc. I don't know if you've seen
I've seen
4 or 5-year-old boy.
Of course, it's everywhere.
Yes. But they're blaming this on Assad and Putin.
Sure.
Assad is guilty for defending his city. Think about the insanity of their propaganda. It's Assad's fault that his army is defending his city.
And so and God help that little boy and his family. So they trot out this little boy and say, Assad bad. See, this is why we have to get Assad. Assad is bad.
That would be like the German war machine propaganda saying that it was the fault of the King of England in World War II for defending London from German bombing raids.
Yeah, and
it's like, look what you did.
Look at all the children that died
because you were defending your city when we bombed it.
What I thought was so insidious about this, they kept saying this is the face of the Syrian war. I'm just thinking, the real face of the Syrian war
is Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton
And the
Yes.
CIA.
and John McCain. Those are the faces of the Syrian war. The Nobel Peace Prize winning president, Barack Obama, who's on vacation playing golf while his own citizens are floating in the bayous of Louisiana. But he's the war president, not the peace president. He's the war president. Face of the Syrian war is Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, John McCain, Lindsey Graham.
The whole war machine.
That's right. They have to have war. Those guys just carried out the instructions of their puppet masters. Their puppet masters are the billionaires who run the war machine, who need their business model needs perpetual war
Yes.
and trouble in the world. That's how they make billions of dollars, creating war.
I came across a clip from a few months ago by Christine Lagarde of the IMF, where she said, when there's trouble in the world, our banks make money, but when there's peace, it's not so much. I mean, she said that.
She admitted it.
That was a message she delivered to the Wharton School of Business.
That's
And
their business model, Doc.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't even
They
hide this
admit it.
stuff anymore. They don't hide it anymore. It is their business model.
So Satan profits by killing, stealing, and destroying.
The only
That's how
thing
he profit. That's the only thing he can only profit from destruction.
it's the only thing he knows. All right, so we got Russian warships in the Mediterranean firing cruise missiles at targets near Aleppo today. So this is another sign that Russia is widening its military operation in Syria after starting its bombing campaign in Iran. Do you guys think will the U.S. and the West pack up and leave at some point, or are they just going to burn it all down
I think
on the
they're
way
gonna
out the
blow up.
door?
I think they're gonna back out. They are not ready to start this.
Oh,
If they want to start this right now.
They're getting ready for the next phase of their 7 to 10 nation occupation. Last week we shipped off some more troops to Somalia and Sudan. That was completely under the radar. That you never heard that in the mainstream media. But those nations were also on that Wesley Clark list as well. So we've got fighting going on in Libya. We've got U.S. troops in Somalia and Sudan, which were on the hit list that we like to call it.
But
And we just like to cause trouble. It's like we're going around and knocking chips off everybody's shoulders.
But the U.S. and NATO destroyed Libya. Libya, I mean, Muammar Gaddafi was a ruthless, dictatorial strongman. But as they said about Mussolini, the trains ran on time. If you had gone to Libya when he was there, most of the people said, let's keep Gaddafi in power. Everything's great.
And you know what? Gaddafi allowed Christians to worship.
They weren't crucifying Christians when Gaddafi was in power.
Same thing with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein gave freedom to Christians.
The churches operated every week. They had no fear of Muslims coming in because Hussein would never have allowed Muslims to crucify Christians. Not that he cared for the Christians. He just wanted to have a day that he didn't have any trouble. He wanted law and order in his country. And so he ruled with a ruthless fist. And if you got out of line, he stomped on you like a bug.
Well, it once again shows the staunch difference between Christianity and conservatism. Under conservatism, you export democracy. Under Christianity, you export the gospel. Wherefore that?
That's right. We want the gospel to go forward. Assad allowed Christianity to flourish. I mean, Christianity has been in Syria for 2,000 years.
Right.
Damascus and Aleppo and some of the other cities, they trace their heritage back to the apostles.
Yes.
It was in Antioch that they were first called Christian. Assad never permitted the persecution of the Christians. In fact, when the U.S. started this war against him, the Christian archbishops of the ancient Christian churches in Syria were defending him.
And remember when all this first started breaking out with Syria, there were a lot of stories about Christians in Syria and them, being at the forefront of the attacks and everything. But now, not so much. Now, you don't hear those stories. Now you don't hear that being told. And I'm talking about from the Christian press. And the Christian press in the beginning, it was like, oh, there's Christians are really suffering in Syria. Now, not so much.
That's because there's not many alive.
That's a part of it, but I also think that there's another reason that they're part of the machine as well.
Hey, Doc, I will. You know about this. You guys, both of you know this. I'm not going to give out the details, but I have been working for quite some time to make direct contact with the ancient Christian church in northern Iraq and Syria. That there are several we would say denominations. They don't call themselves denominations.
Right.
But all of these churches are 2,000 years old. The most dominant one in northern Iraq that traces its roots back to Nineveh, to the Old Testament times. Right. Okay. I've made contact with some of their senior leaders and told them, I just asked, what can we do? What can your brethren here in America, what can we do to help you? How can we assist you? And they have written back to me, most gracious letter or email telling me that they have, that they actually said it is so dangerous that a lot of their projects are on hold right now because it's so dangerous that they can't even get aid to the Christians in some parts of Iraq and Syria. But they did tell me that there are some areas that they have refugee camps for the Christians, and that if we could help them in any way, they would be just extremely grateful. And they also said food is vital, and so I'm talking to them about whether we could get freeze-dried, dehydrated food to them. But I know also, with tents, shelter, clothing, blankets, just basic things to keep people alive.
Right.
So I just want our True News audience to know this is something that we're working on, and I'll give you more details as they communicate with me once we know how we can get assistance to them.
Yeah, because for us, it's not just reporting the news. We want to do something. We see what's happening here.
It just breaks my heart. Every day that I read this stuff, my heart just grieves because I know that there are, as we sit here in America, fat and happy, we eat well, we're dressed well, we live in nice homes, we drive nice vehicles. Life is good for us in America. And yet, right now, this very moment, in real time, as you and I are sitting here talking, there are hundreds of thousands of Christians in the Middle East hiding. Others are trapped in the most desolate places, just trying to get by every day, living in refugee camps, sleeping on the ground or sleeping on cots. This is taking place 24 hours a day, and our Heavenly Father sees it. He sees it, and He's looking at us here saying, does this bother you? Does this affect you? Do you think about it? This is one of my gripes about the American evangelical church world. They really don't care. There's no sorrow. There's no grief. There's no compassion how, that our brethren are suffering right now. And even worse, they don't even realize it is the fault of the United States government that they are suffering.
Oh,
That's what makes me so mad that Obama, McCain, Lindsey Graham, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, the CFR, that whole gang of neocons, these warmongers did this to our brethren in Iraq and Syria.
But how great is our God that he has moved in a nation like Russia? Before Russia's involvement in this conflict in both Iraq and Syria, I know for a fact
he turns the heads of the king.
He does. Even an unrighteous king, in order to fulfill his purposes, he will do it. I mean, we're supposed to be a Christian nation. That's what, I keep hearing all the time. I don't see it. I haven't seen a Christian nation in my entire life. And yet, if we call ourselves a Christian nation, what are we doing to defend Christian brothers and sisters around the world who are in these conflicts as a result of our Christian nation policies? It doesn't make sense, does it? Because we're not of this world. This isn't our kingdom. The United States isn't our king. We're citizens of another nation.
Doc, most Christians in America have zero awareness that the United States of America and the Western nations backed ISIS. They do not know it, and when you tell them, they don't believe it. Look at the reaction when Trump said Obama started ISIS. Look at the reaction that people denounced Trump for making an outrageous statement, they said. He told the truth. Then he tried to walk it back. Well, I was being sarcastic. I meant that their policies. No, tell the truth, Donald. They started ISIS. Anybody who has followed what has been going on for the past 5 years knows that the U.S. built up ISIS in Syria.
Right, for the purpose of trying to take out Assad. That's why.
What do you think Benghazi's all about? Why do you think they're still stonewalling the truth about Benghazi?
Because ISIS was put in there to take out Gaddafi and his government.
That's right. They were running the guns out of Benghazi to ISIS.
And so they just roll out ISIS wherever they need it at that particular time.
You've got Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John McCain all in the hip pocket of the Muslim Brotherhood.
They may not have actually started the name, but they took over the franchise. That's for sure.
Well, where did ISIS come from? It didn't exist. All of a sudden, one day it's there.
Right.
A strategic rebranding is what the Pentagon probably called it.
And, then we make partnerships with Al-Qaeda to fight ISIS. Weren't we fighting Al-Qaeda?
This is propaganda coming out of Washington.
Sure.
We had to reach out to the moderate faction of Al-Qaeda to fight ISIS. Really?
It makes you wonder, do you think the Romans called the different Gaelic and British tribes by different subnames?
But then who started Al-Qaeda? Who trained Al-Qaeda? Who armed Osama bin Laden? The U.S., the CIA. Right.
Yeah.
They're still doing it. And the people are falling for the propaganda. They're still buying into it. I thought it was interesting in today's news, two prominent people in Crimea this week, Vladimir Putin and Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great, the ruler of the empire, is the ruler who brought Crimea into Russian territory.
Okay.
Back in the 1800s. I read today that a statue of Catherine the Great was erected today in Crimea, that this statue had been taken down like in the 1920s, I guess, after the Bolshevik Revolution, when the communists, the Trotskyites, the neocons,
of their day, yeah.
Yeah, they took control of Russia and brought in 70 years of communism and hell to the Russian people. But they took down the statue of Catherine the Great in Crimea back around 1920. It was put back up this week, but at the same time, Putin is in Crimea.
Yes. Yeah,
there's significance to this.
They'd had a long week of military drills there, active military drills in Crimea, and he arrived the last day of the drills.
Hey, before we leave the Syrian, because we started talking about Crimea, but one other story regarding Syria is that an admiral, a Russian admiral, Vladimir Komodov, said that the Chinese military's desire to establish military ties with Syria is the first step toward forming a military political coalition of non-NATO countries.
Yes. We were just talking about this yesterday, weren't we?
A Eurasian NATO.
That's what it is. Here's the quote. The Chinese military in Syria is the first step towards putting together a serious military political coalition dominated by countries that are not aligned with the aggressive NATO bloc. The time has come to form such a coalition. It is the Eurasian Military Alliance. So now we have the NATO alliance, and now there is a Eurasian Military Alliance. Since World War II, the world has been dominated by NATO.
Right.
This alliance of Western European, Great Britain, the United States, Canada, the Western nations that rule NATO.
Yeah, basically the winners of World War II.
That's right. And the whole world has had to deal with the fact that NATO is this giant military alliance that can come in and crush small nations. This is what we did with Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
We destroyed Yugoslavia.
Right.
We eliminated the country back in the late 90s under Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. NATO has been carrying out this very aggressive military campaign since the 90s. Now there is a new kid on the block, a new sheriff in town.
And what came with the prior military bloc was you were forced to buy into the Western economic system. We've heard from Jim Willey.
That was the purpose of the military bloc.
Right. Jim Willey was talking about the Eurasian trade zone being something maybe 5 to 10 years from now that will be accepted and will be widespread. Well, the first step, as you said, is a Eurasian military alliance to protect that new Silk Road.
I guess what remains to be seen is over the next 10 years, will the Western alliance collapse and disappear? Or will it shrink?
Or contract, yeah.
Contract and shrink. And we have a period of time where the world is divided between two major military alliances. You have the Western NATO alliance and then the Eastern Eurasian alliance.
Right.
And now it's a bipolar world.
Again, whereas before it was the United States and Soviet Union, United States, NATO, and the Soviet Union kind of in polar opposites there with China floating around out there somewhere. Now you truly have polar opposites.
Well, I think with nuclear weapons in play, you'll never truly see a full collapse of any of these power blocks. I think a contracting or a splitting of the U.S. power block is likely, maybe even inside our own country. But whoever controls the nuclear weapons is going to control a portion of that real estate.
Yeah, but if you're part of the Eurasian alliance and you've got Russia on one shoulder and you've got China on the other shoulder, and you're part of a banking financial alliance with them and a military alliance with them, I mean, that sounds like a good deal for a lot of these countries. And all these countries want, they want the same thing NATO has. They want cars. They want nice houses. They want, everything that these folks have over here, but they haven't had because the NATO powers have controlled the financial system of the world.
So, Doc, if we have a bipolar system, these smaller nations are going to be compelled to choose sides.
Yes.
There will not be any middle ground.
Right. And you'll see it from Southeast Asia to Africa to South America. You're going to have to make a choice at some point which system you're going to be a part of. And, I know eventually it's going to come to a one world system, but to get to that point, it might have to be two systems competing for that one world system at some point.
I don't know if it ever gets to a one world system because the Antichrist is at war.
Right. And
there's a big chunk of the world that says, I'm not going with you.
Right.
Why would he be at war?
Yeah. Well, and if you can think of the two competing systems being part of the one same system, I mean, really, it is. I mean, that's the way Satan operates anyway. I mean, but, he came to divide, to kill, to steal, destroy, and he'll use that to do it as well.
Hey, what do you make of this Reuters report? The U.S. military has withdrawn from Saudi Arabia, its personnel dedicated to coordinating with the Saudi-led air campaign in Yemen, sharply reducing the number of U.S. staff elsewhere who were assisting in that planning. Once again, the U.S. is leaving the Middle East.
Remember the story I shared yesterday about the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman telling Saudi Arabia, you better quit bombing civilian targets in Yemen. And we're saying it just like that. It was a nice lady saying it. She said, Saudi Arabia needs to cease bombing civilian targets in Yemen.
Who made that?
That was the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman.
The Russians, not the Iranians, the Russians.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman, a lady, and they were translating it for her, but she was going, Saudi Arabia needs to stop or say cease bombing civilian targets in Yemen. And because that got me to thinking, that's the next stop for Russia right there.
Because the war in Yemen was another proxy war where Iran was on one side and Saudi Arabia was on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. was providing military assistance to the Saudi Arabians, and the Iranians were providing military assistance to their group in Yemen. And now you have Iran lined up with Russia and Turkey,
and now
they're feeling a little bit stronger and bolder, more confident that they've got some bigger allies to back them up.
And now is the U.S. sending a signal saying, we got outplayed on this. We better pull our resources back before we get sucked up in this situation in Yemen too. I just find it fascinating that they're actually pulling out their advisors on the Yemen conflict.
What is the latest regarding Crimea? There were war games going on there right now.
Yeah, and Putin's was there
personally
today. He came in person there.
The Trunews published Vladimir Putin flew into Crimea on Friday, a day after staging war games there. He said he hoped Ukraine would see common sense when it came to resolving a diplomatic crisis over the peninsula. The Russian leader used threatening rhetoric, promising unspecified countermeasures, and has built up troops ahead of a big military exercise this month. What do you think? Is the West going to push the envelope in Ukraine, or is this thing going to die down also?
I think it's going to end up dying down. Poroshenko, of course, will commit and will be very boisterous, but they need more than ground troops. They need more than armor. They need the U.S. with our intelligence and our close air support and also our cyber capabilities.
And they needed Turkey.
They needed Turkey.
They needed Turkey, and they don't have Turkey anymore. Because Turkey was going to provide the money, and they were going to provide the troops necessary in order to fight in Crimea. I don't think Ukraine can call
What would
can
be
call the cards.
What would be the point of Russia invading Ukraine? I don't see where they get anything out of this.
No, they get trouble. That's all they get
Right.
out of moving into Ukraine. They don't get anything out of it. Ukraine's economy is falling apart.
But they get a lot of bad publicity.
Yeah.
Well, they already control the productive portion of Ukraine. And again, they have their spot. They wanted to maintain Sevastopol and the Crimean Peninsula because of the military assets they had already placed there prior to the coup led by the U.S. in Kiev.
You see, Russia doesn't have to invade Ukraine. It'd be stupid for them to. All Russia has to do is walk over here to the pipeline and start shutting the valves off to the Ukraine, because Ukraine totally depends on the oil and gas coming out of Russia. They totally depend on it. In fact, we were talking the other day, they're billions of dollars in debt.
It's the natural gas that they depend on. It's coming through the pipeline through Ukraine. That's what they depend on, and they run their factories on it. They heat their homes with it. Without the gas, it's over. But if Russia cuts off the pipeline, the flow of gas through that pipeline, they also cut it off to about 13 or 15 other Eastern European countries.
That's true.
That now become embittered against Russia.
Mm-hmm.
What I find so interesting in this, I think the last pivot country that would solidify this would be Germany. And one thing we didn't mention yesterday is Germany is heavily dependent on Russia and the Asian bloc for energy and food. Another thing often gets overlooked, Ukraine is still the breadbasket of Europe.
It is.
It's where Europe gets its food. So when it comes down to this, all these nations, Poroshenko, again, I think he's turning into a Eastern Europe version of Kim Jong-un. You know, he's going to make these statements. He's going to say that they're about to invade.
Well, he said today he's going to declare martial law.
Right. Well, he's a dictator. This man is an animal in a sense of how he's ruling his country.
And, you know, in that article that we have on the website, if you really read it, Putin's trying to make a deal here. He's trying to tell him, listen, you know, there's no reason to go through all of this. There really isn't. But if you want a final option, better know we're going to respond to it. I mean, those are the words that he used, the final option.
Somebody's putting something in Poroshenko's head saying, don't cooperate with Russia. Somebody's goading Poroshenko to keep going. But then he pulls back because he knows, like you said, Edward, he can't go to war alone. If the U.S. and NATO if they don't back him up, his goose is cooked.
Well, there's my even attempted to make a comparison between the North Korean leader and him is maybe aid is also dependent on him being boisterous and making these threats. Maybe Poroshenko knows that not only is his money going to drop, but support to keep him in power in that part of Ukraine. And he rose on a Hitler-esque platform that I will come and I will conquer and I will get back stolen territory and we're going to ethnically cleanse this area of Russians and anybody who's not for a solid Ukraine with NATO.
You know, this next story out of Russia, the American people need to hear this story. Because you need to understand what is being said about the West and other countries. This is an RT story. Russian troops were allegedly on the hunt for NATO soldiers during a mission in the northwest of the country. However, there's no need to panic. The alliance is not invading, as it was merely a mock exercise to simulate a hypothetical incursion into Russia. The opposing force was not specified, but messages played out over loudspeakers as the drills took place left little room for the imagination. Now, listen to this. This is what the Russian soldiers were shouting in the loudspeakers. NATO soldiers, you are being lied to. You are not peacekeepers. Lay down your arms. Your treacherous attack is disturbing a peaceful country. You will suffer retribution and the anger of a people who have never suffered defeat in any war. Drop your weapons. Stop being pawns for your leaders. This is what the Russian soldiers were saying in a war drill?
Yes. They're getting ready. They absolutely believe NATO is going to make a move on them.
And this drill was inside Russia.
Yes.
So this was their civil defense.
Yes.
They were saying to invading NATO troops, lay down your arms.
You're being lied to. We are not the aggressors. You are. This is a peaceful nation.
Wow. Do people understand how close we are to World War III? I just don't know. I don't think very many people in America have any idea, any clue how close we are to World War III. And if we get smoked, it'll be because we started the war.
Yeah.
But the problem will be nobody will know it because they'll all be dead.
Yeah.
There won't be anybody to say, we told you so, because everybody will be dead, including the people who said, we told you so. Hey, let's take a short break. And when we come back, we'll finish today's program. I want to talk about the political campaign. Donald Trump was in Baton Rouge today. Barack Obama was playing golf. And we'll talk about it when we come back. You're listening to True News.
You're listening to True News, the end time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
Here's Foley Beach with today's word from the Lord.
It seems that Jesus is assuming his followers will give, will pray, and will fast. He says, when you give, when you pray, when you fast. His concern is that his followers, when they practice this kind of piety, will do things in the right way and in the right motives. He wants our focus to be on him. He wants our hearts to be set on him, not about impressing people that are around us or who are observing us, but that we might impress him.
To hear more of the teaching of Archbishop Beach, visit awordfromthelord.org.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the end time newscast.
Welcome back to True News. I'm Rick Wiles. Doc Burkhart and Edward Zoll are here with us. Hey, we appreciate your prayers and support for True News. We can't do what we do every day without your support, and we are very, very grateful. Thank you for supporting us. We've had enormous increase in expenses this summer. And God has provided. We are grateful, and we give him all the glory and the praise and the honor. Our television studio was built debt-free. It is just stunningly impressive. If you could see it in person and walk into the studio and see it, it is a stunning television studio, and we're working towards getting this thing geared up sometime in September. I to be honest with you, I think it will be late September. We still have to pay for the lighting, the cameras, all these other things. It's $100,000. That has to be done immediately, and so that's our greatest need that we're facing right now, and then once that equipment is installed, then we are actively recruiting and hiring the professionals that we need to produce the daily television program.
Right.
A video program is a different animal than a radio program. A lot more goes into it, a lot more preparation, and
A lot more people.
a lot more people. That's right. You know, Doc, I know I've told this story many times, but in my days in the 1980s when I worked for Pat Robertson at CBN, the 700 Club, at that time, I don't know what the figures are now, but I do recall that just for the production, the daily production of the 700 Club in the 1980s when I was there, There were 300 employees assigned to the daily production of that program.
Of a 1-hour television show.
A 1-hour program. There were 300 people working on that program. I don't know what it is today. Gosh, that's, that was the 1980s, a long time ago. But I know back in the 1980s when I was there, that a sizable portion of the CBN staff worked on one thing, the daily production of the 700 Club. But the 700 Club was the most professionally produced Christian TV program at that time, and was for many, many years a pioneer, a leader. But it takes a lot of people. That's why we're recruiting now, and we're recruiting 7 people, something like that,
We
7 or 8 people. I know. I'm just talking about what we actually have job openings for right now.
And we're getting some great candidates, but we need more.
Yes,
so we need more candidates.
We do.
So check out the website. Go to the careers tab at the bottom of the website. It says careers there. Click on it. See if you qualify. If you know someone who does, get the word out. We're looking for quality people committed to the vision of True News to join our team.
That's right. And if you'd like to help us pay for the lighting and the cameras, just the 4 cameras, $60,000 for 4 cameras. Doc, when I started in television around 1980, the cheapest camera that you could get, and I mean, we're talking here low budget camera, was, it was probably over $100,000 for one camera. And that was considered a low grade camera for a television studio.
Wow. And that was back in the 80s, right?
That was in the 80s. A control room. The control room was at minimum budget for a tiny little control room was $250,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
Our control room, we probably spent less than $40,000 because the technology has improved.
Right.
Technology is being miniaturized. You can buy equipment and software and technology now to do things that decades ago cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do, and now you can buy with tens of thousands of dollars. But still, tens of thousands of dollars adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we do need your support. Go to truenews.com
Amen.
And click support. If you want to use PayPal, it's support@truenews.com. And if you want to send a check, a money order, or precious metals, address your letter to Post Office Box 690069 in Vero Beach, Florida. The zip code is 32969. Donald Trump and Vice Presidential candidate Mike Pence went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana today to tour the flood damage that has killed at least 13 people, displaced thousands of citizens. In East Baton Rouge Parish today, Mr. Trump's motorcade drove through some of the hardest hit communities where he saw homes that had been destroyed, soaked carpet that had been ripped out of homes, pulled out and laying in front yards, drying out. People, just their furniture, everything out in the front yard just destroyed from the flooding. Of course, Barack Obama hasn't shown up yet. Barack Obama's been on vacation playing golf. Obviously, I don't think Barack Obama cares about white Christian people. I really don't. I don't think he cares about white Christian people. I think he's a racist, and he has no good for white Christian people. That's my personal opinion, watching this guy for 8 years. I think the man's a racist. He cares about cop shooters. He really gets worked up about cop shooters. He loves cop shooters. He gets very, very passionate about cop shooters.
Yeah, he'll show up at Baton Rouge for that.
Yes. I mean, if a police officer shoots somebody who's waving a gun, Barack Obama will get really upset and lash out at the police officers. He'll always defend, a cop shooter. But he doesn't care about white people, white Christians that have lost their homes in a flood. The man's a racist. Just say what it is. He's a racist. He's the most racist president that's ever been in the White House, most racist person since the Democrats of the Civil War era.
Who started the Ku Klux Klan, by the way.
That's right. I mean, the Democratic Party was always a racist party. It's just the racism has changed. Where they used to be racist against black people, the Democratic Party is now racist against white people. It's still the racist party.
And they still have a plantation mentality, by the way.
Yes, it's called economic dependency.
Yes.
Nothing's changed. They're still the plantation owners. They're still the slave owners. They have control of the government entitlement programs, and they've got minorities eating out of their hands, but they're still a racist political party.
From fields to cities, they've conquered the urban areas and turned them to ghettos.
I'm surprised that Bush has been blamed for all the flooding down in Louisiana.
Oh, do you remember after Katrina? Do you remember what Obama said about George W. Bush? Look, I wasn't a big fan of George W. Bush, but
No.
He got hammered about Katrina. You know what his crime was? He flew over the flooded areas, and he observed it from an aircraft. And Obama and the Democrats and the news media said, how inconsiderate. He's up there in a plane. He doesn't care. All he had time to do was fly around. They campaigned in 2008
Yes.
on Katrina.
Yeah.
And Bush's insensitivity to the suffering of the people, along the coast that were hit by Katrina. Obama's been on vacation. His daughter's smoking dope. The Secret Service had to get her out of a dope party last night.
Yeah.
But I don't see the media talking about it.
They don't talk about that either.
But Obama has. I wonder if Obama has even called the governor, the Democrat governor of Louisiana. I wonder if he's even picked up the phone and called him. The governor of Louisiana today warned Mr. Trump, don't come down here and take pictures. Don't use my state for a photo op. And then they asked him, well, where, some local reporter said, well, where's Mr. Obama? Well, we don't want him to come here. We really don't expect the president to be here because he would divert our attention away from helping the flood victims if we had to protect the president. It'd be better that the president not be here right now.
But it's okay for President Bush to fly over Katrina because that's...
Yeah, because that's what Bush said. I don't want to land because it would divert attention.
Right.
So they beat him up. The press and the Democrats, they went after Bush because he didn't land. Well, Obama didn't even fly to Louisiana. He's still in Martha's Vineyard playing golf, making sure his daughter's got enough weed to smoke. Well, isn't that the truth? I mean,
it is true.
I mean, you see the pictures of Obama toting on a joint when he was young. I mean, let's just say the way it is. I mean, he doesn't care.
He's taken his reefer madness to the White House.
Yeah, we've all suffered the delusion of his reefer madness for 8 years.
Now, I saw Donald Trump and Mike Pence with Franklin Graham.
Yes, I saw Reverend Franklin Graham walking with Donald Trump there today. I love Franklin Graham, respect him, admire him. He's the real deal. He's a great guy.
He was down there with his organization, Samaritan's Purse.
That's right. That is an organization that gets things done.
They do.
And I strongly support them, recommend. I mean, don't ever feel bad about, don't ever question giving money to Samaritan's Purse. They're a good group. I've seen their work firsthand. And years ago, it was 2010 is when the earthquake hit Haiti. And Trunews, we were one of the first organizations on the ground in Port-au-Prince the first week of that earthquake. We teamed up with another ministry. They rented a plane. They paid for it. They chartered a plane, a jet. And we bought the stuff to go in the jet. the cargo.
Right.
And that's how we got stuff to Haiti the very first week after the earthquake. We bought tons, literally tons of food, water, blankets, tents, sleeping bags, medical, bandages, whatever we could get. We bought tons and put it on that jet, and it landed in Port-au-Prince, the first week. And then immediately after that, we started chartering a de Havilland Twin Otter out of Jamaica, because the Lord spoke to me, and I had never heard of Jacmel, Doc. I had never heard of. I didn't know anything about Haiti.
Right.
The Lord kept speaking to me, Jacmel. I'm like, what is Jacmel? So I looked at a map of Haiti, and I saw there's a city in the southern part of the island called Jacmel. And the Lord said, get food to the orphans in Jacmel. Doc, when those times when you're hearing the Lord speak, but your carnal, natural mind wonders,
am I really hearing God?
Am I really hearing God? Is he saying orphans in Jacmel? Well, we chartered a de Havilland Twin Otter out of Jamaica. We started flying food and blankets and other aid into Jacmel. Here's what we found out, Doc. The earthquake had cut off the road, the main road from Port-au-Prince to Jacmel. No aid had gotten to Jacmel, because all of the aid that was coming in from the United States and other nations was all going to Port-au-Prince. But as they went down the main highway through the mountains, the earthquake had cut off the road.
Right.
Nobody went to Jacmel. And so the Lord directed us, fly the aid to Jacmel. And there were orphanages there, and so they were so grateful. We were able to get food and supplies to them. And then we started building tents.
Right.
Not only in Jacmel, but throughout Haiti, around Port-au-Prince. There were so many orphanages that had been destroyed. There were new orphans created by the earthquake. There were churches that suddenly had an orphanage, Doc. Pastors that, had never had an orphanage in their lives, and suddenly they've got 20, 30, 40 kids that they're caring for. And so we went in and built heavy-duty tents.
Right.
To supply lodging for those children. And so the only thing that we could do at that time with the money that we had is that we built these high-quality military-style tents, and we got food to those orphanages. And we did that for months and months and months. They just make sure those orphans had a place to sleep. We bought beds, mattresses. We were doing whatever we could do. But Doc, this is where I'm taking this story. My heart was hurting so much because at that time, the Trunews budget was small. This was 2010. And we were really stretching our faith to get these things there. And I would go to Haiti, and I would see with my own eyes the destruction, see the children sleeping outside. And it just broke my heart. And, at night I would just think about it. There are hundreds of thousands of people in Haiti sleeping in fields. Hundreds. I guess at one point, several million people were sleeping in fields, in mud, in whatever condition it was there. It broke my heart day after day after day. But I remember, Doc, the day I went back to Haiti, and there was this one particular orphanage that had just grieved me that we were doing everything we could to help them. And when our driver pulled us up in the mountain area to this orphanage where we had put up tents months earlier, I saw plywood buildings that had just been constructed. And I'm looking around, I'm going, what is this? How did these buildings get here? Our tents were still standing.
Right.
But all these new plywood buildings were there, and I got out of the SUV and I walked up to the plywood buildings, And there, imprinted on the plywood, was Samaritan's Purse.
Praise God.
And Doc, I'm going to tell you, I started crying. I had tears running down my cheek, and I praised God for Franklin Graham. I stood there and I asked God to bless Franklin Graham and bless Samaritan's Purse, because, Doc, we did all that we could do. We did what we could do at that time with the resources that we had. And those tents, that's the best I could do at the time. I couldn't do anything else. I did the best that I could.
But God honored that and used that.
He honored that, but then Franklin Graham showed up and put up permanent buildings.
And did the rest. And contrast that with the Clinton Foundation.
Oh, don't even get me started on those thieves.
That worked with Warren Buffett and Clayton Homes to send 400 temporary trailers down there to Haiti. Not a single one was shipped, and spent over $200 million on that project. Somebody got rich off that. And so that's really where the Clinton Foundation got all of its big money, was right there in the 2009, 2010 period because of Haiti. That's when they got the big money.
And the people of Haiti are still poor, and the Clintons are richer.
And the Haitians hate them.
They really do. They really do. Hey, before we close, there was Donald Trump gave a speech, I think yesterday, in which even some of his critics said this is the best speech Donald Trump has given. I want to play just two sound bites. I'm going to play clips 3 and 4. And this is what Donald Trump told the audience yesterday.
As you know, I'm not a politician. I've worked in business, created a great company, created lots of jobs, rebuilding neighborhoods. That's what I've done all of my adult life. I've never wanted to learn the language of the insiders, and I've never been politically correct. It takes far too much time. Sometimes, in the heat of debate and speaking on a multitude of issues, you don't choose the right words, or you say the wrong thing. I have done that. And believe it or not, I regret it, particularly where it may have caused personal pain. Too much is at stake for us to be consumed with these issues. But one thing I can promise you this: I will always tell you the truth. I speak the truth for all of you and for everyone in this country who doesn't have a voice, of which there are many. While sometimes I can be too honest, Hillary Clinton is the exact opposite. She never tells the truth. One lie after another, and getting worse with each passing day. The American people are still waiting for Hillary Clinton to apologize for all of the many lies she's told to them and the many times she has betrayed the American people at great danger to them. Tell me, has Hillary ever apologized for lying about her illegal email server and deleting 33,000 emails? Has Hillary Clinton apologized for turning the State Department into a pay-for-play operation where favors are sold to the highest bidder, which is exactly what's happening? Has she apologized for lying to the families who lost loved ones at Benghazi? Has she apologized for putting Iran on a path to nuclear weapons? Has she apologized for Iraq, for Libya, for Syria? Has she apologized for unleashing ISIS across the world? She and Barack Obama unleashed ISIS. Whether you like it or don't like it, whether you want to hear it or don't, that's what happened. Has Hillary Clinton apologized for the decisions she made that have led to so much death, destruction, and terrorism? I think you'll get that apology around the same time you'll get to see her 33,000 deleted emails. In other words, you'll never see the apology.
Well, Doc, I think, we know Donald Trump has a new team of campaign managers. Paul Manafort's out.
Right.
A new team has come in. And I think that speech is the first product of that new management team.
Letting Trump be Trump.
Yes, but it's more focused.
Right.
Somebody's helping him be more focused in what he's saying.
Right. And telling him, you're going to be president.
That's right. Well, listen, that's it for today's edition of True News. Thank you so much for listening. Doc Burkhart, Edward Zoll, and I will be back on Monday. We pray you will have a very blessed weekend. And listen, if you're in Florida, come and visit us at Flowing Streams Church on Sunday nights at 6 p.m. We meet at 9045 Americana Way. This is the location of our television studio now.
Mm-hmm.
And our church service is in the same building, 9045 Americana Way. It's just east of the I-95 exit at Vero Beach. And we're off the road about, a couple of 2,000 feet. We're between the Comfort Suites and, what is it?
Howard Johnson.
Howard Johnson's Hotel.
Right.
If you can figure out how to get back there to the Comfort Suites, you will find our building. And we're there every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Come as you are, casual dress. Don't worry about dressing up. Just come as you are and meet Susan and me. We have a great time of worship and praise every Sunday night at 6 p.m. 9045 Americana Way, Vero Beach, Florida. God bless. We'll see you on Monday.